It was my 5th year by that Playboy's side. Photos surfaced, suggesting I might be pregnant. Rumors exploded in our circle. Everyone thought I was using the baby to force my way into a wealthy marriage. Upon hearing the news, the long-absent white moonlight rushed back to the country in a fury. I thought a bloody, all-out war was about to erupt. But when Lou Heron returned from his business trip, all he heard was that I had terminated the pregnancy and slipped back to my hometown. Sigh. Girls like us, the good girls, can fool around all we want in our daily lives, but if we were to actually carry a child with no name or status, our parents would kill us. 1. In the dead of night, right after I hung up on the doctor, the doorbell to the living room rang. I closed the suitcase and turned to answer the door. The man, wearing a leather jacket that felt cold to the touch, tossed a heavy set of sports car keys into my arms and said with clear annoyance, "Why did you change the gate code?" I bit my lip and whispered, "I'm afraid some obsessive fan might stake out my front door." He scoffed dismissively, "With this neighborhood security, even a stray cat can't get in without being registered, let alone a full-grown person." Well, they can, I thought to myself, like your precious white moonlight did. She even kicked my door in. I took his coat and hung it up on tiptoe, along with the familiar scent of fur. There was a hint of cloyingly sweet women's perfume. It was exactly the same scent as the one on yesterday's unexpected visitor. I pretended not to notice. He suddenly reached out, brushing his knuckles against my eyes. "Have you been crying?" I was taken aback, surprised he had noticed my slightly swollen eyes. I lied offhandedly. I was watching a movie. Seeing my long lashes lower, his gaze followed, landing on my bare feet. The autumn chill was deepening, but the rug still hadn't been laid out. He frowned slightly, scooped me up in his arms, and carried me to the sofa with a hand under my thighs. He probably thought I'd been swayed by the recent gossip, and so he began to speak. People in our circle loved to gossip. If getting pregnant was really a ticket into a wealthy family, all those women waiting for their chance would have been throwing themselves at me long ago. "I have other plans for this child. Behave yourself. Don't be like those foolish women dreaming of climbing the social ladder. The position of Mrs. Lou isn't so easily won." These words were a reprimand, and a warning. He's had plenty of women around him over the years. He plays around, sure, but when it comes to matters affecting the family's interests, he never wavers. The moment I dared to think of using a child to compete for something, like the other women in our circle, he could take everything back at any moment. Returning me to how I was at the very beginning, feeling a bit weary, I leaned against his shoulder and softly murmured an Suddenly, his gaze paused, noticing my suitcase lying open on the floor. Going back to the old hometown again, he frowned almost imperceptibly. "Yeah, my parents said they miss me. All these years, whenever I felt wronged, I would run straight home. No sooner had I declared I'd never come back than I was secretly booking the earliest flight home. Missing him too much to stay away, realizing the Mid-Autumn Festival was coming up, he didn't think much of it. Stay a couple of extra days while you're back home. Steer clear of those people with bad intentions. We can talk about the child's situation later." He didn't mention the one who got away, the one who had just returned from abroad. I knew better than to ask. 2. I fell for Lou Heron at first sight. If you're asking whether it was more about affection or more about advantage, then it was absolutely a physical attraction. As a good girl raised on rigid doctrines since childhood, I followed the path my parents laid out at every stage of my life, attending a teacher's college, majoring in literature, and returning to work at my alma mater after graduation. My belated rebellion erupted in my first year of teaching. In the eyes of my fellow teachers, I saw my entire future laid out before me: teaching, arranged meetings, marriage, children. On a sweltering yet uneventful summer afternoon, I stared blankly for a long time at the lesson plan before me and the bouquet of roses on my desk, a gift from the new male teacher. I've known since I was little that I was blessed with a pretty, sweet face. Countless boys have shown interest in me, so many that it made me feel like an easy target. It's annoying, and honestly, a bit depressing. Sure, some of them were genuinely sincere, but their shy blushes and nervous stutters always left me feeling underwhelmed. I want to tear off the labels that have been stuck on me. I want to become the center of attention, someone utterly out of reach. This impractical longing keeps getting pushed down, only to resurface again and again. That was until a friend who's a talent agent asked if I'd be interested in joining their audition show. That was probably the most rebellious thing I've ever done in my life. I quit my job, cut off my heavy bangs, and returned to Kyoto. Everyone said the path into the entertainment industry was a tough one, but I was young then, and having made a splash on a talent show, I thought I was a destined star, brimming with passion for the road ahead. It wasn't until half a year later, after hitting wall after wall, facing contract termination from my agency, having no roles to play, and even getting harassed by a producer, the man leered and promised that if I went with him, he'd make me a star for sure. I looked at his balding head and quietly averted my gaze. Actually, maybe I don't need to be that famous after all, at least I can't stomach this. I thought my acting career, which hadn't even begun, was about to be ruined, but then I met Lou Heron. In a private room packed with D-list celebrities and directors, this carefree young master sat at the head of the table. His voice was flirtatious, his lips curled in a lazy smirk, a cigarette rested between his slender, well-defined fingers, and the expensive watch on his wrist glinted in the fragmented light. It was a sight for sore eyes. One look, and I was completely smitten. What can I say? We good girls have zero resistance to that kind of charming rogue, and to top it off, he chose me and pursued me with grand, sweeping gestures. He publicly declared me as his little girlfriend in front of all the media. You can just imagine, picture this, on a sultry late-night breeze, a handsome, effortlessly cool air leans against his $1 million red convertible, one hand in his pocket, a huge bouquet of delicate, fragrant red roses sits on the passenger seat, and he flashes you a knowing smile through the crowd. It was absolutely to die for. This was a kind of person my dull and monotonous former life had never brought me into contact with. It was also the first time I truly heard the frantic pounding of my own heart. My best friend showed me boundless patience and understanding. Regarding this lopsided dynamic, she stated with utter seriousness, "What's the big deal? For a good girl like you, you've got to get the wildness out of your system before you can settle down and marry someone respectable. A wealthy heir like Lou Heron, even the crumbs that fall from his table could set you up for life. Seriously, make the most of it and get what you can before he loses interest." I couldn't agree more, and so I willingly let myself drown in the warmth he wove around me. Lou Heron is incredibly generous, never hesitating when it comes to giving gifts. Knowing I wanted to act, he even personally brought scripts right to me to choose from. With him around, all the difficulties and hassles on set just vanished. The path to the Golden Rooster Award became incredibly smooth, leaving me only to focus on honing my acting skills. If his first love hadn't come back into the picture, I might have selfishly clung to his side for another couple of years, hoping to win that ultimate prize. 3. I'd heard about this Chinese actress who'd been grinding away in Hollywood for years before finally getting her big break. The first time Lou Heron's best friend met me, he immediately compared me to her. She's pretty enough, but her personality is too mild, nothing like Shenlan's fiery spirit. That was the first time I ever heard the name Shenlan. The name of the woman Lou Heron had loved with all his soul, and later came to despise with every fiber of his being. When it came down to it, the reason his high and mighty brothers could tolerate a second-rate celebrity like me was simply because they believed Shenlan had wounded him too deeply all those years ago. Everyone in our circle agreed someone needed to stay with him to help him through this. The dazzlingly beautiful actress showed up at my apartment with her bodyguards. She smashed my door, shattered my vase, and right in front of me, threw my kitten out the window. The kitten's piercing shriek made my whole body tremble. Tears streamed down my face uncontrollably, yet I couldn't even muster a complete, threatening sentence. She dusted off her hands with deliberate slowness, then looked me up and down with a pitying gaze and said, "To think Lou Heron kept you willingly for 5 years. I expected someone formidable. Turns out you're just a pushover." Then again, who wouldn't keep a pet with no temper for a few extra years? No need to bother coaxing it. My whole body trembled. I'd bitten my crimson lips until they bled. Breaking and entering, property damage, and on top of that, animal abuse. If word of this gets out to the police, it could ruin her in an instant. Bodyguards were blocking my front door. She seemed to see right through me. Stepping aside with a haughty air, she sneered, "Go ahead. There's a police station just 200 meters to the right. Be my guest. Let's see who ends up trending online." Her brazen confidence made it clear she had powerful backing, and that confidence, I suppose, comes from Lou Heron. But I don't think she's in the right. As far as I know, you and Mr. Lou aren't even exes. May I ask what gives you the right to barge in here? The right, she sneered, as if she'd heard a joke, on a rainy night. He nearly got himself killed racing on the overpass just to chase after me. What kind of right do you think I need? Do you know why he's parading you around so ostentatiously? It's just a show for my benefit, to force me to back down, she scoffed disdainfully. Did you really think he actually likes the good girl type? My knuckles turned white as I forced a cold smile, mimicking her. But I'm carrying his child. Do you really think he'll just abandon me? Shenlan couldn't help but laugh at my words. You don't actually think a child is enough to control him, do you? Her voice was barely a whisper as her gaze dropped to the slight swell of my abdomen. Before he returned to the country, he called me. He said if I was willing to yield, he could take care of the pregnancy. She watched as the color drained from my face. The curve of her lips deepened into a more pronounced, utterly careless smile. But what if I refused to back down, Miss Jiang? Tell me, if next time my bodyguards get a little too rough, or if I accidentally bump into you, do you think Heron will blame me for being reckless? Or will he blame that child in your belly for being an eyesore? The evening sun streamed in through the window. The sky was ablaze with sunset hues, reflecting the utter certainty of victory in her eyes. My blood ran cold. I was utterly speechless, unable to utter a single word. She carried herself with a confidence that bordered on control. This is something I could never possess. Even after all this time by Lou Heron's side, I've never truly understood my weight in his world. From the very first moment we met, his gaze wasn't truly on me, but on a young starlet who bore a striking resemblance to Shenlan. As for why he chose me in the end, perhaps he simply wanted to use my gentle, pliant nature as proof that he was no longer hung up on that fiery, unattainable white moonlight of his past. If all he wanted was a child, then anyone would have sufficed. Why should I get myself involved in this mess? But you might ask, in all those 5 years, did Lou Heron really not have any feelings for me at all? All I can say is, I don't know. He may come across as a charming, mischievous playboy who's affectionate everywhere he goes. But the truth is, he doesn't really take most things to heart. For instance, all the holiday gifts he gave me were bought by his assistant. And the restaurants for our dates were always picked at random. Yet, whenever I ran into trouble on set, he wouldn't hesitate to step in personally and back me up. During the 5 years I was by his side, he also invested heavily on multiple occasions to have leading lady roles custom written for me. He even brought in award-winning actors to play supporting roles and hired top-tier directors to helm the projects. It seemed like I was showered with the utmost favor. Yet no one ever considered that an image like mine wasn't suited for a leading lady role. So, every project I took on flopped, one after another. My career tanked to a point that left everyone in the industry utterly baffled. I even won the Golden Broom Award once, mocked by my peers for my poor acting. I was so upset I cried in his arms all night. Back then, he was probably trying to mold me into another Shenlan. But in that very aspect, I was the least like Shenlan. He probably found it amusing. A glint of playful teasing in his eyes. It really is quite poor, not even as sincere as when you cry in bed. All these years, I'm probably the first investment project of his that's been a guaranteed loss. He had been drinking a little. Maybe he was in a good mood, or maybe he just didn't care. Then, with great amusement, he pinched my cheek and, right in front of me, called the organizers to award that young actress a Golden Broom Prize as well. It sounds rather childish, but it's often these silly little things that truly move us. As if I could ever agree to have a child with him. He was the one who got drunk that evening. Yet I was the fool who, in a moment of weakness, said yes. 5. Back then, his father was critically ill, and the children from each branch of the family were busy suppressing the news while scrambling for their share of the inheritance. As the youngest and most favored son, he naturally became a target from all sides. For several months, he didn't come to see me. During that time, a big shot in the industry, thinking I'd been dumped, started making advances and asked if I wanted to be with him. I turned him down again and again, as tactfully as possible, but it still managed to upset him. After a dinner, he cornered me in a hallway in a fit of rage and ripped half of my skirt. Thankfully, my agent rushed over just in time to stop the whole fiasco. From then on, I was constantly sabotaged on set. And even my wire stunts kept going wrong. That is, until word finally reached Lou Heron. He made a point of clearing his schedule to pick me up from the film set. That evening, as the sky blazed with sunset, the black Maybach appeared abruptly yet silently outside the set. The moment I got in the car, I was hit by the strong smell of vodka. He must have had quite a bit to drink. A flush of deep crimson had spread across his neck. The collar hung open loosely, allowing that striking flush of red to spill across the pale, cool expanse of his chest, more vivid than the evening sky. "You've lost weight," he murmured, pulling me into his embrace. His long fingers kneaded the soft flesh at my waist, his languid tone barely masking his exhaustion. "When no one's watching, you don't eat properly, do you?" My nose tingled with emotion, my voice coming out soft and faint. "It's not that, the new role calls for a leaner look." He held me like that for a moment longer, then added, "Oldwin will pick you up and drop you off for work these next few days. Call him anytime if you need anything." Oldwin was his personal driver. For those with impure intentions, this served as a veiled warning. I sniffled and said, "Okay, actually, it wasn't just me who had lost weight. He had slimmed down quite a bit too." It was the first time in all these years I'd seen him look so somber and weary. So when he finally spoke up and said he wanted a child, I was completely stunned for a long moment. This wasn't the first time he'd brought up the subject of children, but the previous 2 times, he just gave a lazy smile, saying he was bored and wanted to raise a child for fun. This time, however, he didn't smile. The wealthy have their own share of troubles. If something hadn't happened, he probably wouldn't be in such a rush to have a child. "How about it, sweetheart?" he murmured, stroking my hair, his breath still carrying the scent of alcohol. "Let's have a baby of our own, just a child. One always has to pay a price for a smooth journey." That's the excuse I made for myself. I gently pressed my forehead against his, my long lashes fluttering, meeting his gaze. I responded softly yet earnestly. "Okay," I said, "I'll have a child for you." 6. This child came at a great cost to me. Once news of the pregnancy got out, first my endorsement deals were pulled. Then the role I had secured was given to someone else, and my social media was flooded with trolls. I was just a moderately successful figure. But suddenly, a flood of scandals emerged about me. They say I'm a terrible actor, that I only got roles through connections, that I'm unprofessional and throw my weight around. Some even go so far as to call me a homewrecker, accusing me of meddling in other people's relationships. My pregnancy test results were inexplicably leaked to the public. Hashtags like "mistress schemes her way to the top," "forces the heir's hand with an out-of-wedlock pregnancy," and "the one who got away flees abroad." While the other woman plots in the shadows are trending, it's impossible to tell who's behind it. For several nights, I've had the same nightmare. A woman pushes me, and I fall, with blood pooling all around me on the ground. I wake up in the middle of the night, my forehead and palms slick with cold sweat, but I didn't dwell on it. I just thought it would be best to have this child as soon as possible. This went on for 4 whole months. That is, until today, when I saw Shanlan. What truly made me decide to terminate the pregnancy was the final sentence she left me with. "If Lou Heron wants to consolidate his position, what he needs to do is bring home a legitimate heir to the Lou family, and a wife from a prominent family, one who can provide him with the backing of her clan. And I suspect Miss Jiang is unaware that I had an accident when I was 14, my uterus was removed, I can never have children, so it's perfectly clear who this child is meant for." She left it at that, taunting. "But you know me, I'm far too proud to tolerate another woman's child, even if it is born. I have 100 ways to arrange an accident. Miss Jiang, you know what the right choice is." She turned and left with her entourage of bodyguards in tow. On the surface, she was leaving the choice in my hands, but every word she'd spoken was a threat. The orange-red sunset burned thick as blood. I stood alone in the cluttered living room for a long time. A stinging ache welled up in my eyes. My fingers curled slightly, and suddenly, tears began to fall. The hands of the wall clock ticked forward. The shadows from the setting sun crept slowly across the room, stretching the lonely hours into an eternity. All those years by Lou Heron's side. I had spent so much time waiting alone. He's always done exactly as he pleases. One minute he'd say he was coming over to stay the night, the next he'd be heading to the bar with his buddies. People say he's a bit of a player. Probably because in those settings, when girls would come onto him, he wouldn't mind popping open a bottle of champagne for them to the sound of everyone's cheers, or even sharing a kiss. Occasionally, I'd accidentally stumble upon these scenes. Onlookers would always tease me, asking if I wanted to trade him in for a new boyfriend. Lou Heron then drawled out lazily, telling them to stop corrupting me. He let go of the girl in his arms and instead pulled me into his embrace. The teasing looks from the onlookers made me blush, and I buried my face in his chest. He rested his head on top of mine, gently nuzzling my hair, and sighed contentedly. So well behaved, as it happened more often, he would also nibble on my earlobe and ask, as if casually, "Why are you never fussy? Aren't you jealous?" I stared at the chaotic play of light and shadow in the private room, at a loss for words for a long moment. Why not make a scene? Was it confidence in my own charm, or a sober awareness that it would lead nowhere? Or perhaps, I simply hadn't had my fill of the game. Most girls can get some compensation by making a fuss, then turn and rush into the next whirl of extravagant indulgence. But I'm different. I want to enjoy a couple more years by his side. That's why I never make a scene. Apart from having a few too many ambiguous relationships with other girls, he was incredibly good to me. Just because I casually remarked, "Where are the fireworks?" On New Year's, the night sky over Victoria Harbour was lit up with a spectacular display that lasted the entire evening. When I showed a little extra fondness for a piece of jewelry, he outbid everyone, paying millions to buy it for me and personally placing it on me in front of everyone. Simply because I wanted to see the snow, he chartered the entire private cable car line at a Swiss Alps ski resort. I've shared passionate kisses with him on the streets of Paris, learned the art of wine tasting from him at a private estate in Italy, and taken his red Ferrari for a spin through the empty streets in the early hours of the morning. Behind every one of these scenes was a level of wealth that's simply unimaginable to most people. Having lived through those experiences, I feel I can be content. 7. When I actually started packing, I was surprised to find I didn't feel much reluctance in my heart. People change. The way you think at 23 is always different from how you think at 28. Kyoto is wonderful, but River City is home. If Lou Heron had been a bit more observant, he might have noticed. My favorite vase, the one that used to sit in the entryway, was gone. The usually affectionate kitten was listlessly grooming itself in its bed, a bandage wrapped around it, and on my ankle was a faint, shallow cut from a piece of porcelain. But he didn't notice a thing. After dinner, he just went straight to his study to take care of some business. He's going to the States tomorrow to check on his equity holdings and, while he's at it, deal with a few of his illegitimate children. He'll likely be gone for quite a while. This, of course, gives me the perfect window to get the abortion and leave. I made a full circuit of the house. The wardrobe was mostly filled with luxury handbags and jewelry. Even if I brought them back to Jiangcheng, they'd be of no use. Just as I was about to close the wardrobe door, a diamond-encrusted ring tumbled out, at last year's auction. Lou Heron bought this specifically to spite a rival's wife and then gave it to me. It was originally supposed to be a matching set for him and me, but he threw his piece away. The message was pretty clear: don't get any ideas. I found the original velvet box to put it in, then dug out a postcard, wanting to write something to mark these 5 years, but after turning it over in my mind, I couldn't figure out what was worth writing. In the end, it was just a mutual charade. A game we both willingly played. On the brink of falling in, I even felt a flicker of gratitude towards Shenlan for pulling me back. Resting my chin in my hand, I wrote in a daze, the fountain pen leaving small ink blots at the end of each sentence. Lou Heron, thank you for taking care of me these past 5 years. I really like Kyoto. It's always so lively here, but I often feel lonely too. I miss home, and I long to settle down. My parents are getting on in years, and they depend on me. Don't blame me, Lou Heron. I'm mostly just writing down whatever comes to mind. In the end, I left these words: may all your wishes come true. Congratulations on your wedding. 8. It was already midnight when I capped my pen. Lou Heron had just finished showering and came out. Seeing me tossing and turning in bed, he reached over and pulled the covers off me, exposing my head so our eyes could meet. Can't sleep. I pursed my lips and whispered softly, a little bit. Is it because I'm not there? He raised a brow and leaned down to meet my gaze. I hesitated for a moment, then gave a slight, almost reflexive nod. Truth is, I was just wondering if I should change my flight for the day I'm supposed to leave. Even though the doctor said it's an outpatient procedure with general anesthesia, I'm not sure I can handle it all on my own. It seems I've always been accustomed to relying on others. First it was my parents, and later, it was Lou Heron. The man's lips curled into a faint, knowing smile. So spoiled, he scoffed with disdain. The man pulled back the covers and lay down. His black silk robe fell slightly open, revealing a few suggestive marks on his chest. They were likely left by a woman's long fingernails, not mine. I would never dare to dig my nails in that hard. He was complaining with his words, but his actions clearly showed he was enjoying it. As he lay down, he pulled me a little closer into his embrace. I stared at the ceiling for a while, then suddenly turned over and asked him a question. Lou Heron, if I accidentally fell and had a miscarriage, would you be angry? Don't know, he answered bluntly, perhaps because everything had been perfectly resolved, his voice regaining that lazy, casual tone. Anyway, I don't like kids. They're noisy and a hassle. Why are you asking that? I said slowly. No reason, just asking. I closed my eyes, drifting into a drowsy state. Suddenly, he placed his hand on my slightly rounded belly. Feeling the novel sensation of movement beneath his palm, the man mused, if it's yours, it'll probably be very well behaved. I'm not really that well behaved at all. I tilted my head back to receive his kiss, but in my mind, I was already calculating how to get an abortion and make a clean getaway. 9. I woke up late the next day. I thought Lou Heron had already left for the airport, but then I heard him on the phone with a friend in the living room. His phone was on the dining table, on speaker. Shun Lan is hardly the quiet type. With all this online drama blowing up, are you really not worried about your little girlfriend getting into trouble if you leave the country now? I've got some business to handle. Keep an eye on things for me for a couple of weeks, Lou Heron said, flicking his cigarette ash with an air of indifference. I just saw Shun Lan yesterday, still as foul-tempered as ever. She wants me to change my mind, but she won't swallow her pride. As if things could be that easy, Chen Yi's tone was teasing. And how exactly am I supposed to do that? Want me to have Jiangyu stay at my place for 2 weeks? Wasn't the whole point of having a kid to force Shun Lan to come back for the arranged marriage? Now that you've gotten your wish, seriously, why not hand that little girlfriend over to me? I've never had a go with someone so docile and innocent. Sure, Lou Heron drawled, his tone dripping with insolence, if you want it. Go ask her yourself. See if she'll even let you get close. Chen Yi caught the absolute certainty in his words. Leaning back in his chair, he sighed with envy. I really envy you, having such a devoted little girlfriend. So, do you genuinely want to have this child, or are you just trying to force Shun Lan to back down? A faint smirk touched Lou Heron's lips, and a rare glint of interest flashed in his eyes. Whether to have it or not can wait. Let's see what Shun Lan's attitude is first. Chen Yi asked curiously. You keep bringing up Shun Lan. Aren't you worried your little girlfriend will get upset? She might just up and leave you for someone else tomorrow. She won't. Lou Heron said dismissively. I'm the one who gets bored and leaves people, not the other way around. Besides, she's still dreaming of winning a Golden Rooster award. She wouldn't dare walk away. At this point, Lou Heron seemed to remember something, his face taking on an expression of smug confidence. Her acting is atrocious. Even if Shun Lan makes the biggest scene, she's not going anywhere. He didn't say that without reason. Jiang Yu's poor acting skills aren't limited to the screen. In the early years, the affection in her eyes for him was impossible to hide. Just a simple kiss made her neck flush with excitement. And she was so nervous she didn't dare open her eyes to look at him. Later, when she was drunk, she leaned against his chest, tracing circles absent-mindedly while murmuring something under her breath. He leaned in closer to listen and just managed to catch that soft, dependent confession. I really like you, Lou Heron. He was quite drunk himself at the time, and his mind couldn't quite process the words. He dismissed the subtle flutter in his heart as nothing more than the alcohol's influence. After a moment of stunned silence, a playful, almost roguish smile surfaced in his eyes. Like me, this was the first time someone had confessed their feelings to him in such a naive, foolish way. 10. Born into a wealthy family rife with intrigue and rivalry, and bearing a striking resemblance to his father, he had witnessed more than his share of naked ambition and ruthless scheming. Even his own mother didn't seem to love him all that much. Raising him was merely a ploy to extort a hefty sum from his father. He learned from a very young age that every act of flattery concealed an ulterior motive. Just like those girls who threw themselves at him, their mouths were full of sweet nothings, but their eyes were fixed on that limited edition bag in the display case. Later, he met Shenlan, who absolutely refused to marry him for the sake of a business alliance. It was the first time he found something genuinely interesting. She was the first person he had ever met who refused to flatter or fawn over him. Later, when he took Jiang Yu in, it was merely to provoke her, to see if she truly didn't care. By all accounts, a proper kept lover shouldn't overstep, harboring unrealistic fantasies about their patron. Yet, he didn't find this affection from Jiang Yu to be offensive at all. The feeling of being loved wholeheartedly, admired, and depended upon is far from unpleasant. On the contrary, it's utterly intoxicating. Love is a double-edged sword bestowed by fate upon the beloved. You can wield it as a knight to protect your partner, or just as easily turn its blade to pierce their heart. Once you are certain of their love for you, from then on, you hold the power to toy with their affections, watch as they bare their soul and offer you everything. Jiang Yu was the first young girlfriend he openly acknowledged. It was the first time he had formed such an intimate bond with someone. And he was acutely aware of the upper hand he held in this relationship, so, he took it for granted that Jiang Yu would always revolve around him. She would become insecure and anxious with Shenlan's arrival, loving him to the point of agony and despair. She would lose sleep over him night after night, crying until she had no tears left. Just uttering the words for his sake was enough to make one's heart tremble. He could hardly wait to see the look of utter agony and collapse on Jiang Yu's face after he chose Shenlan. He was so fixated on this mental image that he failed to realize the truth. He was longing for Jiang Yu to love him. 11. The procedure went smoothly. It was over in the blink of an eye. An autumn wind swept maple leaves up to the window. I stared blankly for a moment, then suddenly reached down and touched my lower abdomen. I, too, had looked forward to that little life. I even clumsily tried to learn how to knit a sweater, but never finished it. It's not needed anymore. All the apprehension, anticipation, and worry about the new arrival have vanished into thin air. Shenlan came to see me, still looking down on everyone from their high horse. Next month is my engagement party with Lu Heron. If you're still bitter about it, Miss Jiang, you're welcome to stay and make a scene. My voice was soft. That won't be necessary. It wasn't even really love. I was just 23 and looking for a bit of excitement. I've gained enough over the years. There's nothing to make a fuss about. Just then, a WeChat message came through. It was Lu Heron asking why I was in the hospital. Without batting an eye, I said, just a cold. He never even bothered to ask where I was from, anyway. Change the WeChat, ditch the SIM card. After that, trying to find me would be like looking for a needle in a haystack. 12. The first time Lu Heron didn't receive Jiang Yu's goodnight. He simply thought she wasn't feeling well, perhaps with a cold, and didn't think much of it. But there was none the next day, nor the day after that. Even though she was busy filming, she used to send him a couple of messages now and then, sharing funny stories from the set. He rarely bothered to listen to them. Most of the time, he'd just glance at the transcribed text. But now, his WeChat was eerily quiet. He suddenly felt a bit out of sorts. Autumn arrives late in Florida. Some brands, through assistant Lin, inquired if he wanted to add some autumn attire for Miss Jiang. Holding his phone, he leaned back in his chair and gave a faint amham. He really shouldn't be bothered with such trivial matters. Right on cue, Assistant Lin's respectful voice followed. There are also some maternity and baby supplies. Should we send those over as well? He lifted his eyelids slightly. Outside the window, vast swathes of maple leaves, red mingled with green, rustled as a desolate autumn wind carried a chill through the air. It was rare for him to remember Jiang Yu's due date. It's next spring. Truth be told, he didn't care whether this child stayed or went. It was just a tool, after all. But as these little things about the new life became clearer and more tangible, he was inexplicably filled with a different kind of feeling. That was his child. His Adam's apple bobbed slightly as he instructed. Send it over. After a long moment, he picked up his phone and sent her a message. He told her to have someone lay down the carpet in the room. He wasn't really the considerate type. But then he remembered how she loved to walk around the house barefoot. I just sent a couple more messages. It's cold out. Make sure to dress warmly. It wasn't until the fifth night. The chat window remained completely empty. She didn't reply to the message. This has never happened before. He rubbed his temples, feeling an inexplicable heaviness in his heart. Is she upset? So, is she angry? Applying those words to Jiang Yu always felt a bit unreal to him. After all, For 5 years, she had always been gentle and obedient. He never felt the need to explain himself to her. He was the one who ordered the pregnancy test results to be leaked, and he also orchestrated the online uproar. He simply wanted the news to reach Shenlan's ears. To see if she truly didn't care about her position as Mrs. Lu, Jiangyu is someone who cares deeply about her online reputation. She barely slept a wink during that period. She has always worked very hard on her acting, but the results often fall short. Some people just aren't cut out for acting. Are you upset because you found out about this? But they're just empty, meaningless opinions. What's there to be angry about? He hadn't mentioned Shenlan in front of her. Nor had he said anything about his own engagement, so what on earth is she making a fuss about? Assistant Lin's call came at just the right moment, his tone tinged with caution. President Lu, the autumn clothes and maternity supplies have been delivered to Miss Jiang's door, but no one answered the doorbell. That's perfectly normal. Jiangyu said she was going back to her hometown for a couple of days, but it's been almost a week now, and she still isn't back. I asked the security guard in our complex. He said Miss Jiang took an injured cat with her the day she left. An injured cat? He keenly picked up on that piece of information. Jiangyu doted on that cat. Even when she was away on business for filming, she would specifically hire someone to care for it at home. On the rare occasions he stayed over at her place, the cat would insist on sleeping between them. How on earth did this get hurt? He frowned. The assistant clearly knew this as well. The security guard said it fell from the 12th floor balcony 2 weeks ago. Luckily, it got caught in the treetops and was rescued. 2 weeks ago was precisely the day Shenlan returned to the country. He seemed to sense something, a vague unease stirring within him. Pull up the surveillance footage. Find out what happened to that cat. 13. Shenlan never bothered to cover her tracks, so the security footage easily revealed what happened that day. After the plane touched down in the country in the early hours, Lu Heron called her directly. His voice was flat and unreadable, betraying no emotion. Come to Mars Cafe. You have 10 minutes. After they met, Shenlan tossed her bag onto the table and admitted frankly, yes, I went. So what? I just wanted to see what kind of little plaything could make you willingly keep her for 5 years. I thought she must be something special, but she got scared out of her wits the moment I came back. Didn't even dare to keep the child. Lu Heron let out a scornful laugh, his voice turning icy cold. A plaything? Is that what you thought when you threw her cat off the 12th floor? It's just a cat. What does it matter if it's dead? Are you really going to turn against me over some outsider? At those words, the man's air of casual irreverence vanished completely, replaced by a ferocity she had never seen before. His eyes were ice-cold as he sneered, enunciating each word. Shenlan. Just who do you think you are? Shenlan was stunned. This was the first time he had ever spoken to her like that. Raising her suits me just fine. Unlike you, since you can't have your own, you can't stand to see anyone else with a child. That hit a nerve. Shenlan clenched her fist tightly, rising to her feet with nothing left to lose. Lu Heron, what kind of attitude is this? Don't take your anger out on me. If you hadn't turned a blind eye, could that online storm have even started? You used her as a pawn to force me back, and now you're putting on this act of deep affection. The child's gone. Isn't that exactly what you wanted? Weren't you just trying to use the child to make me submit? I merely did the house cleaning for you ahead of schedule. House cleaning? Lu Heron sounded as if he'd heard something utterly absurd. Shenlan, you seem to have gotten a few things wrong. His voice wasn't loud, but every word dripped with sarcasm. First, whether I want her or whether I keep the child is my business. Who are you to overstep and take matters into your own hands? Second, Shenlan, do you think too highly of yourself? I was just bored with life and wanted to force you back to see how you'd react, like amusing myself with a dog. Did you really think you mattered? Shenlan's face instantly paled. What do you mean? Nothing much. Just thought I'd teach a lesson to someone who doesn't know their place. Lu Heron cut her off with a detached air, made a call, and tossed the phone onto the table. The person on the other end addressed him respectfully as young Master Lu. The Lu family patriarch had quietly handed over control of nearly all the core businesses to him. Given his elevated status now, an arranged marriage was naturally beneath him. When he turns on you, he does so with utter ruthlessness. The man's tone was calm, his eyes laced with mockery. Miss Shenlan seems to have too much free time back home. Terminate all the deals she's currently negotiating. Put the word out, Anyone who helps her will have me, Lou Heron, to answer to. Furthermore, hasn't her father been pinning his hopes on those few projects for a comeback? Shut them down. I want the Shun family to become a non-entity in the Beijing social circle from now on. There was no hesitation on the other end of the line. Understood, young Master Lu, I'll see to it immediately. Shun Lan collapsed into the chair, utterly drained of strength. The color drained from her face, her lips trembled, and she couldn't utter a single word. Only now did she finally understand. In the world of the wealthy elite, there is no such thing as a true romantic. All his grand, passionate pursuit of her had been nothing more than a pastime to relieve his boredom. Lou Heron looked down at her disheveled state and asked with casual indifference, Shun Lan, have you learned my rules? 2 lines of tears streamed from the corners of her eyes. Shun Lan let out a self-mocking laugh, digging her nails fiercely into her palms. 14. Lou Heron had a little to drink, not much, just to perk himself up. Not much had changed inside the villa. The pair of fluffy slippers still sat on the shelf in the entryway. The unfinished cat food remained in the bowl by the corner. A chill late autumn breeze seeped in through the window left ajar, and the shag rug had yet to be laid out. Apart from the air being a little too still, everything seemed just as it was the day he left. He didn't turn on the light, making his way toward the sofa. As soon as he sat down, he felt something small and hard pressing against him. Frowning, he reached down and fumbled for a moment, his fingertips brushing against something soft. Reaching in, he pulled out an unfinished sweater. It was a warm, pale yellow, with 2 little flowers embroidered at the neckline for decoration. A slight buzz from the drink made his thoughts sluggish. He stared at it for a long moment before remembering Jiangyu had been knitting this for their unborn baby. His fingertips unconsciously traced the delicate pattern. The sweater still seemed to carry her scent. He spoke almost reflexively, with his usual impatience. Jiangyu, put your things away. They're in the way here. The sound was jarring and loud in the empty living room. No response. The air inside was cold and still, and beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, the deep night stretched out in desolate silence. It took him a long moment to slowly realize, Jiangyu was gone. She's already gone back to her hometown. He settled back onto the sofa and closed his eyes. His phone buzzed in his pocket. It was Chen Yi calling. The voice on the other end sounded tentative. I heard from Assistant Lin that you cut off all cooperation with Shun Lan and halted the Shun family's projects. Are you serious about this? Lou Heron didn't respond. Chen Yi changed the subject. So, did you find Jiangyu? Lou Heron said irritably. Who said I was looking for her? Chen Yi was taken aback for a moment, then went along with it and laughed. Hey, fine. Don't look for her then. I thought it was a big deal. Didn't Jiangyu always go back to her hometown before? She'll probably come crying back to you in a little while. Suit yourself. Lou Heron cut him off icily and hung up the phone, doing the math on the timing. That day she said she had a cold. She must have been at the hospital getting an abortion, keeping him in the dark. She's really got some nerve. He let out a scornful snort. An indescribable emotion surged from his chest, yet he could find no outlet for it, choked with stifling frustration. He simply called up Assistant Lin and gave him a thorough dressing down. After hanging up, he thought to himself again, it was just a child that hadn't even taken form yet. Women who wanted to bear his child could line up from the east end of the city to the west. He snatched up the little sweater and mercilessly tossed it into the trash can. Fine, let her go. She'd better have some backbone this time and not come crawling back to him in tears like before. He's the type who never looks back. 15. The transfer of power within the Lu family went more smoothly than anticipated. On the day of the signing, the board members gathered around him, showering him with flattery. He had secured the power, becoming the heir that everyone envied. With so many girls eager to get close to him now, finding a compliant one would be a breeze. He's taken in a new young girl, named Jiang Niannian. She's quite similar to her, blushes very easily. He settled her in the villa where Jiangyu used to live, without even changing the furniture arrangement, and so the days passed, one after another. His life remains vibrant and fulfilling, with his career flourishing. He had the shows Jiangyu previously starred in suppressed and the promotional banners that were hung for her taken down, to completely erase all traces of her, out of sight, out of mind. Gradually, he found himself thinking of Jiangyu less and less in the dead of night, the one and only time the thought surfaced. It was in the spring of the following year, When Chen Yi announced his marriage to a wealthy heiress and posted a photo of her baby bump on social media, he lingered on it for a few seconds longer. If Jiang Yu hadn't terminated that pregnancy back then he would have a newborn baby in his life right now. Of course, that thought only lasted a few seconds before he snuffed it out with disgust. Just a child, he could have it whenever he wanted, just like when he wanted Jiang Yu to bear him a child. He was only teasing her, never expecting her to actually agree. He posed the same question to Jiang Niannian, asking if she would bear him a child. Her eyes lit up with immense joy, and she feigned shyness as she nestled into his arms, whispering a soft yes. A subtle, restless irritation welled up in his heart. He couldn't help but compare her to Jiang Yu. Jiang Yu wouldn't have agreed so readily, nor would she have been this overjoyed. The heaviness in his chest rose like a tide, swelling higher and higher. 16. Jiang Niannian was indeed a very good and obedient girl. She wore whatever she was told to wear and did whatever she was told to do, but Jiang Yu wasn't like that. She would occasionally throw a little tantrum. He took Jiang Niannian to the same restaurant he used to go to with Jiang Yu and ordered the same dishes. Jiang Niannian would smile and say, "This is delicious." Back then, Jiang Yu would stick out her tongue and say, "It's a bit fishy." Then she'd secretly nudge the plate a little closer to him, so he could help finish it. Jiang Yu didn't treat the luxury items he gave her as treasures. She'd just frown and whisper a complaint to him, "It's so heavy, not as practical as my canvas tote." Jiang Yu wouldn't put on an act and sulk just to be coaxed. Even if he didn't reply to her messages or went back on his word, she wouldn't get angry. The next time she sees him, she'll just pout and ask for a hug. He thought finding someone like her would fill the void in his heart, but only in this moment did he realize he was wrong. It wasn't that gentle face he missed, but Jiang Yu herself. It was the Jiang Yu who would stay up late to make soup for him. The Jiang Yu who would only hide in his arms and cry when she was wronged. The Jiang Yu who looked into his eyes and earnestly said she wanted to have his child. The Jiang Yu whose heart and eyes were filled with him alone, after going around in circles. He finally realized that all he ever wanted was a Jiang Yu who loved him, and so, he sent Jiang Niannian away. 17. He would absolutely never go looking for Jiang Yu on his own. It was too humiliating, too beneath him. However, if Jiang Yu were willing to come back to him of her own accord, he could take her back. He would keep her, just like he used to. Yet another year passed. With spring departing and autumn arriving, Jiang Yu never once called him or sent him a message. He had kept his personal phone number all this time. It was just so she could reach him if she ever came back. Chen Yi teased with a laugh. Who would have thought, even our famously charming and romantic young Master Lu has finally been tripped up by a woman. He let out a derisive snort but didn't respond. His long fingers, however, unconsciously rubbed the edge of his phone. It's been almost a year now. She certainly has a high tolerance for discomfort, if she wanted to be stubborn. He was more than willing to play along, having grown accustomed to the life of luxury by his side. He didn't believe she could truly settle back in her hometown. And so, another 6 months passed. He attended an auction where a rather beautiful pair of wedding rings was on offer. It suddenly occurred to him that he had once bought a ring for Jiang Yu as well. Women always seem to view rings as symbols of loyalty and commitment, but to him, they were just trinkets, no different from other luxury goods bought to placate or please. A lady from a rival family had taken a fancy to a particular ring, one of exquisite craftsmanship, and Jiang Yu seemed to have glanced at it a couple of times herself. She must have liked it, so he outbid everyone, secured it, and tossed the box into her lap. Her almond-shaped eyes widened slightly in surprise, sparkling as she looked up at him. Perhaps it was the perfect evening breeze and moonlight, or perhaps it was the emotional comfort she provided that hit just the right note. In a rare moment of good spirits, he drew her into his embrace. He kissed her while sliding the ring onto her finger. The ring was a bit too small and wouldn't go all the way down to the base of her finger, but it was also incredibly beautiful. "Do you like it?" Her cheeks flushed. "I do." There were 2 inlaid red velvet boxes. Yet they held only a single ring of hers. She must have thought she'd dropped one when she first opened the box. Just as she was about to look down to search for it, she heard him say, "I threw the other one away." It was obvious. That one was the men's piece. Her movements froze for a second. He wasn't a very patient man. He rarely bothered to figure out where a woman's prickly moods came from, nor did he have the habit of explaining the reasons behind his own actions. But she always managed to pull herself together quickly, just like she did back then. She would obediently lean in to kiss him, murmuring words of thanks. Later, because she needed to act in films and the size wasn't quite right, she didn't wear it often, until one day, he found the ring at the very bottom of the cabinet. There was also a postcard beside it. 18. He never allowed Jiang Nian to enter this bedroom, so nothing here had ever been disturbed. He fell silent for a long moment. But in the end, he decided to unfold it and read on. Lu Heron, these years by your side have been truly happy. I fulfilled my dream of acting, saw the sights of many places, and lived a life completely different from before. It's just a shame that I wasn't very talented when it came to acting. I made you lose a lot of money, and in the end, I couldn't even bring back a single award to show you. I really like Kyoto, it's always so lively here, but I often feel lonely, too. My impression of Kyoto is only the dazzling night lights and you, but you have so many friends and gatherings, and when you get busy, you rarely come to see me. I know I rely on you too much. I didn't want to bother you, so I tried my best to keep my distance. Otherwise, you'd definitely say I was being too sensitive. I thought it through carefully before deciding to have the abortion. Please don't blame me, Lu Heron. I just think it's so sad for a child to grow up without a father's care. We all have to take responsibility for our own choices. I miss home terribly, and I really want to settle down. My parents are getting on in years and depend on me. Once I leave, I'm not coming back. That was 6 months ago, right when he went to Jiangcheng to find her, only to learn she had left to teach in a rural school. You've given me too many things, so I've left them all in the cupboard since I can't take them with me. Drinking all the time is bad for your health. I hope you'll eat well and get to bed on time. I heard you're getting engaged to Shenlan. It would be too awkward for me to stay, so I won't be attending. Wishing you all the happiness in your marriage. From Jiang Yu. The edges of the postcard were crumpled from being clutched, his eyes reddened soundlessly, and after a long moment, he let out a self-mocking laugh. The lingering tenderness, like a cold draft, seeped into his chest and squeezed, leaving him breathless for a moment. What right did she have to make that decision for him? Did he say he doesn't want children anymore? Did he say he wants to separate? The emotions that had been building up for over a year finally erupted in full force, reaching their peak because of this postcard. He could no longer be bothered with propriety or reason. He booked the earliest flight on short notice, heading for that riverside city he had never set foot in. 19. He thought that for a man of his power and influence, finding someone would be a piece of cake, but after searching high and low, his assistant only managed to turn up a vague address. He wandered the old neighborhood for days, but found no trace of her. Later, he heard she had gone to teach in a volunteer program, so he went to every volunteer teaching site in the neighboring city, inquiring at each school one by one. He used to think Jiang Yu couldn't live without him. He could find her anytime he wanted, but only now did he realize. If she truly wanted to hide, he could turn all of Jiangcheng upside down and still might not find her. He frequently traveled between Kyoto and Jiangcheng, shuttling back and forth just for a single piece of news about her. Even Chenai joked that he might as well just settle down in Jiangcheng. Just like that, another 6 months or so slipped by. Assistant Lin finally tracked her down to a primary school in a small town where she was volunteering as a teacher. By then, it was already winter. The bitter wind cut into my face, sharp as a knife. At the elementary school gate, she wore a thick, pale yellow down jacket, her hair casually tied up in a bun, with a touch of light makeup, looking gentle and graceful. Her appearance was much the same as before. The only difference was this. A young man was standing by her side, with handsome, fine features. He was saying something to her that made her eyes crinkle with laughter. A breeze blew between them, and she sneezed. The young man then took her hand in his, rubbing it gently to warm it up. The intimacy between them was unmistakably genuine. He felt as if a knife had been plunged straight into his chest. A raw, searing pain spread from his heart. For a moment, he almost lost control, wanting to step between them. But the next second, his eyes caught the glint of rings on their clasped hands. His foot froze mid-step. Assistant Lin whispered from behind, "Mr. Lu, shall we go over?" His throat tightened. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. For a moment, he could only think how absurd it all was. What should he do? Confront her about why she's been avoiding him? Ask her who that person by her side was? Or should he tell her how much he's suffered these past 2 years, how utterly wretched he's been? Jiang Yu seemed to sense something and turned to look. The moment their eyes met, a flicker of surprise passed through her almond-shaped eyes. Yet, beyond that initial surprise, he could find no other trace of emotion in her eyes. She gave a gentle tug on the sleeve of the young man beside her, whispered something, and only then did she approach. "Mr. Liu, what are you doing here?" As the words left her lips, a profound sense of absurdity seemed to well up and overflow from the depths of his dark eyes. "Mr. Liu," she actually called him Mr. Liu, such a distant and formal form of address felt like a line drawn through their 5 years of intimate history. He found it utterly absurd. "Are you here on business?" she ventured, offering him a polite excuse. The corner of his mouth lifted in a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "You could say that, just passing through, thought I'd take a look." He didn't dare say he'd been searching for her for over a year, or that he'd crossed mountains and rivers just for this moment, and he certainly couldn't admit that he'd cast aside all his pride and reason, humbly begging for her to come back to him. How could the esteemed young Master Liu ever admit to having such thoughts? Jiang Yu did not expose his clumsy lie. She merely nodded and said, "It's quite windy here. If you have no other business, you should head back early." She was trying to get rid of him. The wind stung his eyes. Swallowing the lump in his throat, he looked down at her with a condescending sneer. "Since you're already here, why not take a walk with me?" She hesitated for a moment, seeming troubled. "My husband is waiting for me." The word husband instantly ignited all the pent-up emotions in Liu Heron's chest. "So now that you have a husband, you just cast aside your old lover? Have you even spent as much time with him as we have spent in bed together?" The words were utterly vicious. He saw her stunned expression and the faint redness rimming her eyes. His surge of anger fizzled out midway, and he came to an abrupt, awkward halt. A biting wind howled between them. He suddenly craved a cigarette, to steady his nerves, but it wasn't the right time. His eyes grew moist as he drew a long, deep breath. "When did you get married?" 6 months ago. A sudden, sharp pang of regret, long overdue, pierced his heart. If only he had swallowed his pride and gone to her sooner. They wouldn't be speaking now with the barrier of a stranger, her husband, between them. He lowered his head in a ridiculous manner, his gaze pausing briefly before fixing intently on the ring on her finger. It was a plain band, with no discernible value, yet it fit her finger more perfectly than any he had ever given her. Jiang Yu seemed to see right through his thoughts and explained, "It's a very ordinary ring." He let out a self-deprecating chuckle, but in the end, said nothing. "If there's nothing else, Mr. Liu, I'll be heading back now." Jiang Yu turned to leave. Suddenly, she heard him ask, "How have you been these past 2 years?" She was lost in thought for a moment, then a sincere smile spread across her lips. "I'm doing well." She didn't return the courtesy by asking how he had been. She simply said earnestly, "I hope you've been well too, Mr. Liu." On that snowy winter day, their first conversation in 2 years came to an end right there. She didn't even give him a chance to reminisce. She turned and left, arm in arm with the young man. The sky was a cold, leaden gray, and the snow lay thick and heavy. Nearly all the children had already left the elementary school. A little girl in a yellow floral-patterned sweater trailed behind the others. Her cheeks flushed pink from the cold. Spotting her parents, her face lit up with delight. She quickened her pace and rushed into the arms of a middle-aged man. For a fleeting moment, Liu Heron's mind went blank. If that child back then hadn't been aborted, would she have grown into a lovely little girl like this? Perhaps they would have gentle eyes like Jiang Yu's, with a lovely curve at the corners when they smile, or perhaps they would pester him to build snowmen and have snowball fights, sweetly calling him daddy. But life doesn't come with what ifs. Taking advantage of Jiang Yu's love, he acted recklessly time and again. He was doomed to be tormented by belated remorse for the rest of his life. The car slowly pulled away from the city. With red-rimmed eyes, he forcefully threw the ring he'd bought at the auction out the car window. Back in his student days abroad, the city he hated most was London, where the weather was perpetually gloomy, overcast, and stormy. What he hated most now was this nameless little town in the north. Here lay buried his budding romance, and the girl who had once loved him most. The half-knitted yellow sweater, the ill-fitting diamond ring, and their unborn child all were buried beneath the town's snowstorms, lost to memory. The car drove northward. He listened to the howling wind and snow outside, and closed his eyes. Tears fell silently to the ground. From that day on, he would never set foot in River City again. The end. Story 2. After my parents had a car accident, I walked towards the operating table and had an abortion, getting rid of my second child with Morgan. At my parents' funeral, I called Morgan one after another. It was not until his childhood sweetheart, Hannah, answered the phone with an impatient tone. Morgan has gone to cut fruits. What do you want? Holding the urn in my arms, I said indifferently, it's nothing. Just tell Morgan when you've had your fun. I agree to the divorce. I stood alone in the crematorium, watching the only relatives I had in this world leave. At the same time, I also bid farewell to my aborted second child. All the people I loved deeply were sent by my own hands into that narrow cremation furnace. They turned into a handful of ashes, but I no longer cared. Soon, I would be dying too. My parents were both professors and had educated countless people. Many people came to their funeral. However, Morgan, my husband, who should have been there the most, was absent. A student who had been sponsored by my parents loudly scolded Morgan for his ingratitude in front of the tombstone. The looks they gave me were full of pity. They avoided me and whispered privately, "Time reveals a person's true nature." Morgan used to act like a filial son, but I didn't expect he would turn out to be an ungrateful wretch. The doctor told me that I only had half a year left to live. I had unfortunately lost a child before. Since then, giving birth to Morgan's child had always been a longing in my heart. But in the end, I personally ended the life of the child. After all, considering Morgan's disgust towards me, perhaps it was a kind of luck for the child not to be born. I planned to spend the remaining half year of my life traveling around the world with the ashes of my parents and the child, and spending the rest of my life in the days without Morgan. Standing in front of my parents' tombstone, after much consideration, I decided to call him. The phone still went unanswered. The familiar voice echoed in my ears. "The number you have dialed is busy. Please try again later." In the past, I would have broken down because of this. Now, I just felt exhausted. I dialed the number 13 times. When I was about to give up, the phone was answered, but it was Hannah, Morgan's childhood sweetheart, who answered. She asked me in a coquettish and accusing tone, "Missy, it's impolite to disturb others while they're sleeping. It's 7 in the morning in London now." If it were in the past, I might have angrily scolded her, but now, my heart was as calm as water, and I just said lightly, "I want to speak to Morgan." Hannah snorted coldly and looked very impatient. "Morgan has gone to cut fruits for me. What do you want?" Before I could answer, she sneered again, "Aren't you meddling too much? We still have an important negotiation to prepare for. Morgan and I both need to rest. Just tell me what you want." I was silent for a while, my eyes falling on the urn in my arms, and I replied expressionlessly, "It's nothing. Just tell him to come back when he's free to go through the divorce formalities." After saying that, without waiting for her response, I hung up the phone. I had deeply loved Morgan for 10 years and bound him with marriage for 5 years, but I ultimately failed to warm his heart. Now, I had completely given up. The next day, I received a call from Morgan. On the other end of the phone, Morgan's voice sounded impatient. "Wendy, what are you up to this time? I'm telling you, Hannah is my colleague now. We went abroad for business. You deliberately called today and made Hannah cry, and you even said that you want to divorce me because of her. Is this really necessary?" Hannah was the apple of Morgan's eye, and Morgan, who was usually shrewd in business, couldn't see through this obvious lie now. If it were in the past, I might have argued with him, but now, it didn't matter anymore. I gently wiped the portrait of my parents and replied calmly, "Okay, then when will you be free to come back? Let's go through the divorce formalities." There was a sudden silence on the other end of the phone. I thought he was considering the issue of property division, so I comforted him. "Don't worry, I won't ask for a single penny from you. I'll leave the marriage with nothing, anyway." I didn't have much time left to live, and I didn't want any of Morgan's property. It would just make me feel sick. But Morgan gritted his teeth and said angrily, "Wendy, you're hopeless. Give up this idea. I will never agree to a divorce." After saying that, he hung up the phone. I was stunned. "Clearly, before going abroad, it was you who proposed the divorce. Wendy, don't be willful just because your family has shown kindness to me. If you keep acting so unreasonably, we might as well get a divorce." I had seen the divorce agreement in his study before. I had argued with him for several days about it at that time. He explained that it was a divorce agreement from his colleague and that he was just helping to take a look at it. I made him promise at that time that he would never let me see a divorce agreement again in this lifetime. Unexpectedly, this time, it was me writing the divorce agreement, and I was seriously considering getting a divorce. I knew that the reason he brought up the divorce was that Hannah accidentally broke the urn containing the ashes of my first child. I slapped her. When Morgan heard the commotion and rushed over, he showed a look of disgust when he saw the ashes on the ground. Hannah explained with a sob, "Morgan, I didn't mean to, I'm sorry. I was just scared." After hearing this, Morgan slapped me in return for Hannah. He said in a disgusted tone, "The person is already dead. Why keep the ashes at home? It's so inauspicious." That was when I realized it was his child too, but just because I was the one who carried it, he loathed it so much. So on the day my parents passed away, I personally ended the life of our child. On that summer afternoon, my parents had just attended my cousin's wedding. They were driving and sharing the interesting stories of the wedding with me on the phone. I also informed them of the good news that I was pregnant, and they were very happy. When I hung up the phone and was about to send a message to Morgan to share the joy, I suddenly received a recording from an unknown number. In the recording, there was only Morgan's voice. He said, "Master and mistress have been so kind to me. I can never repay their kindness in this lifetime. If it weren't for them, I would have divorced a long time ago. Fortunately, Wendy's first child is gone. Otherwise, I really wouldn't know how to face her child." I was shaking all over. I had always known that Morgan didn't love me, but I never expected that he would loathe me to such an extent. I chose to admit defeat. At that moment, the last bit of love I had for Morgan vanished. I went straight to the hospital for an abortion. But I didn't expect that right after I got off the operating table, I received the news of my parents' death. Their car was rear-ended by a heavy truck, and they passed away. Morgan came home on the third day. I had just come back from the hospital with a bag of painkillers in my hand. The doctor saw that I still didn't have any family members with me and warned me not to make decisions on my own. I could hide it for a while, but not forever. I told the doctor that all my family members were gone, and there was no one in this world who cared about me anymore. I still remember the look of pity in the doctor's eyes. Although the weather was hot, my body was extremely cold. I tightened my coat and opened the door of the villa, only to see Morgan sitting on the sofa. When he saw me enter, he didn't get up. He pointed at the tea table as if teasing a puppy. "I bought gifts for you and Master in London. Come with me to visit Master and Mistress tomorrow." Even after 5 years of marriage, Morgan still called my father Master. I didn't know if it was out of respect for my father or if he wanted to distance himself from me. On the tea table was a tea set and a bag. "The tea set is for Master, the bag is for you." My father really liked making tea and things related to tea. After Morgan achieved success in his business, in order to please his master, he often collected famous teas and antique tea sets. The bag was a famous brand, but it was an old model. Hannah had already shown it off in her Instagram last year. Now I didn't care about it anymore. I ignored him and sat directly on the sofa on the other side, putting the medicine down. I was feeling extremely uncomfortable. Only then did Morgan notice my complexion and asked, "Why do you look so pale? Do you have a fever?" He got up and walked in front of me, frowned, and leaned closer to touch my forehead. When I saw him getting close, I instinctively dodged backward. He frowned when he saw my action. "I don't need Morgan's concern, I'm fine." I lowered my eyes and suddenly understood how Morgan had felt before. It turned out that when you don't love someone anymore, even coming up with topics to deal with them can be so tiring. "It's still early. We can still make it to the Civil Affairs Bureau now." I went back to the master bedroom to put the medicine away, and then took out the household register and went downstairs. Morgan's expression changed from surprise to helplessness and then to anger. "Wendy, have you had enough of this nonsense? You and I both know that as long as Master is alive, I will never agree to a divorce. Master has been so kind to me. If it weren't for his careful teaching, I might have starved to death on the streets long ago, let alone achieved what I have today. To prevent you from being jealous, Hannah was forced to study abroad since she was a child. I married you to repay their kindness. But why are you always acting so unreasonably? I don't understand why they would have such a selfish daughter like you." After he roared, he was like an enraged lion, with a ferocious expression, but I couldn't help but want to laugh, and I actually did laugh. My laughter made my whole body shake. causing severe pain in my abdomen which had just undergone an abortion, and also made tears stream down my face. So, it was all my fault, back then. Morgan's parents died in an accident, and his relatives at home snatched away all the family property. He couldn't even afford his tuition fees. My father felt sorry for him and took him to our home to live for a while. Hannah's family was snobbish and had long wanted to break up with him, but they instigated him to fight for the family property to support Hannah to study art abroad. My parents thought that Morgan was at a crucial moment and didn't want to delay his studies. So they paid for Hannah to study abroad out of their own pockets. As soon as Hannah got the money, she immediately broke up with him. I saw that Morgan was in a low mood, so I began to care for and take care of him. It was from then on that I fell in love with him, unexpectedly. Now, I realized that I had loved the wrong person. I laughed even more painfully, and my mouth was filled with the smell of blood. Indeed, it was my fault. I was completely wrong. Morgan seemed to be scared by my madness. He stared at me coldly and said through gritted teeth, "You're simply unreasonable. If you want a divorce, let Master tell me." Tears streamed down my face. I looked at him with bloodshot eyes and said, "Morgan, from now on, you don't have to bear the moral shackles anymore. You're free. My parents are dead, and we can get a divorce now." Morgan instantly flew into a rage, rushed in front of me, and slapped me. I was sent flying by the huge force and fell to the ground. He still seemed to feel unsatisfied. He stepped forward and grabbed my collar, saying hatefully, "Wendy, I'm telling you, no matter how much you make trouble, I can tolerate it. If you want to divorce me and live with your lover, I can also let you have your way. But how dare you curse master and mistress? They are your own parents." "Yes, Morgan, how could I curse my own parents? I loved them so much." I slumped my neck feebly. The heavy blow of the slap and the soreness all over my body made my mind go blank for a moment. I seemed to see my parents. I really felt like I was going to die. At this moment, a familiar ringtone of a mobile phone interrupted my thoughts and also Morgan's anger. It was the ringtone that Morgan had specially set for Hannah. Morgan slowly composed himself and answered the phone. On the other end of the phone, Hannah was crying and panicking. "Morgan, what should we do? Lana is hurt." Lana was the stray dog that she and Morgan had picked up together. Every time Morgan and I were alone for more than a day, Hannah would use Lana as an excuse to ask Morgan to go back. I watched as a trace of panic flashed in Morgan's eyes and couldn't help but sneer in my heart. After saying that, he ignored me and started packing up to leave. When he was putting on his shoes and about to go out, he turned around and looked at me suspiciously. I knew that he was wondering why I wasn't crying and making a scene like I usually did. No one would care about a passerby, where they were going, what they were doing, or how many people they were sleeping with. The only connection between me and him now was that we were still husband and wife. I didn't want to be called Mrs. Song after I died. I just hoped that he wouldn't delay our divorce. When I saw his gaze, I said calmly, "Go ahead. Just be at the gate of the Civil Affairs Bureau at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning." Morgan's expression changed instantly. He took a deep breath, shook his head in a disappointed way, and said, "A bitter woman." Morgan ignored me and opened the door to go out. The moment he opened the door, he saw Uncle Jack and his wife outside. Uncle Jack's family had been good friends with my parents for many years, but they had already settled abroad, after learning the news of my parents' death. They specially came back this time. Uncle Jack looked sad and said to Morgan, "This must be Morgan, right? You really look outstanding. Wendy's dad didn't put his efforts in vain. Come with me to visit your father later." Morgan looked a bit embarrassed and couldn't help but give me a hateful look at this moment. Auntie was also wiping her tears and choking up. "Your current achievements are worthy of Wendy's dad's efforts. Back then, when you were about to take the college entrance examination, your little girlfriend wanted you to fight for the family property to support her to study abroad. Your family didn't have enough money, so Wendy's dad and his wife borrowed 100,000 yuan from us to send her away and also made sure she didn't break up with you first." Morgan was a bit stunned when he heard this and couldn't believe it. He was suspecting if I had colluded with them to slander Hannah. However, Auntie ignored him and continued, "Alas, who would have thought that ungrateful wretch would break up with you as soon as she got the money? Fortunately, with Wendy's care, you were able to pull yourself together." Auntie took Morgan's hand and patted it firmly. "Morgan, you should treat Wendy well. Only in this way can you live up to Master Wendy's dad's spirit in heaven." Morgan's mind went blank at this moment. After a few seconds, his voice filled with disbelief rang out, "What? What did you just say about the spirit in heaven? Master Wendy's dad and his wife were so kind. How could they just pass away like this?" After hearing this, the corners of Morgan's mouth trembled slightly, as if he was trying to force a smile. No, it can't be. Master was still fine when I left. How could he pass away suddenly? Uncle and Auntie, are you colluding with Wendy to deceive me? That's right, you must be acting. Uncle Jack was a bit surprised to see Morgan's somewhat crazy appearance at the moment. "Morgan, you didn't even know about such a big thing as your father's death." Morgan looked at me with empty eyes. "No one told me." I walked up to Morgan, my eyes filled with tears, and the slap mark on my face was clearly visible. "Morgan, don't you feel guilty when you say that?" Morgan was forced to look away by my gaze. He took a step back and stopped only when he hit the shoe cabinet. I ignored him and turned to Uncle Jack and his wife, saying, "Uncle Jack, Auntie, let me take you to see my parents." In the graveyard, Uncle Jack and Auntie were crying bitterly. My tears had already dried up, leaving only bitterness and pain in my heart. Morgan had already knelt in front of the tomb. Morgan, who was always meticulous and neatly dressed, was now in tears, crying like a helpless child. Perhaps I should be glad that at least Morgan's respect for my father was sincere. The person my parents had devotedly cultivated was not after all an ungrateful wretch, and I was just a parasite between them, trying to get repayment for the kindness shown, and worthless in Morgan's eyes. After crying, Morgan raised his tearful eyes and looked at me. "Why didn't you tell me earlier? You knew how important Master was to me. Why didn't you tell me? At least I should have seen them off for the last time," he roared angrily, venting his inner pain and self-blame at me. I looked at him calmly, with no trace of emotion in my eyes. "When I found out about my parents' death, I called you. I also called during the cremation and the burial. Only one call was answered, and it was Hannah who picked up. She said you were cutting fruits for her. I knew you had deleted my number, but I still sent you countless messages, hoping you would see them. If you had the slightest concern for me, you couldn't have not known about this, Morgan. How else could I have informed you?" Morgan took out his phone with a look of disbelief. He fumbled around checking the call records and finally stopped at the record from 3 days ago. He finally saw those missed calls. He opened number and searched through it 3 times, but couldn't find my number. "If you hadn't been so heartless, you wouldn't have missed these messages." After hearing this, Morgan cried bitterly again and repented in front of the tomb. As for me, after saying all this, I felt weak in my body and a sharp pain in my heart. The bloody wound was torn open again, and I once again experienced that helpless pain. After Morgan's parents passed away, Hannah took a sum of money from my home and then broke up with him. His grades plummeted as a result. My parents saw this and were very worried. I volunteered to take on the task of comforting him. I went to and from school with him, pretending to ask him questions to get him to talk. I learned from Uncle Jack's child how to communicate with boys. In order to help him out of the shadow, I privately organized small group discussions that lasted until late at night. Finally, Morgan got back on track and worked hard, and I, in the process of constantly caring for him, was attracted to him. I fell hopelessly in love with him. My parents, relatives, and friends all thought that we were meant to be a couple. We lived up to everyone's expectations, became lovers, and then got married. There were some things that Morgan didn't know, and it was Auntie who took his hand and told him. Auntie noticed the conflict between us and advised Morgan to cherish me, but she didn't know that this was our story, not Morgan's version. Since Morgan achieved success in his business, things began to change quietly. Hannah soon returned to the country and became Morgan's personal secretary in the company. Morgan told me that Hannah's joining was just for work, however. They went on business trips together, adopted a stray dog together, and reminisced about the past until late at night. And I, from a gentle and virtuous wife, became a young lady who tried to get repayment for the kindness shown. I became the vicious female supporting character who drove away the childhood sweetheart, and an unreasonable and crazy woman. We had been married for 5 years, and I had loved him for 10 years, but it couldn't compete with the lie of his white moonlight. Morgan was shocked as he listened to Auntie's narration. He had never known or noticed my efforts. Only at this moment did he realize my deep affection for him. I watched as Morgan swore to Uncle Jack and his wife that he would treat me well, that he would start over with me, live a good life, and live up to my parents' expectations. There was no ripple in my heart, I just smiled in response. I was grateful to Uncle Jack and his wife for coming all the way to visit my parents and for their care for me, but for their expectations, I could only shake my head. Now, I just wanted to get a divorce as soon as possible. Watching Uncle Jack and Auntie drive away, Morgan cast a helpless look at me. Finally, he slowly walked towards me and said softly, "Wendy, let's go home." I looked at his torn and painful expression and couldn't help but find it ridiculous. I knew that he was waiting for me to give him an excuse to save face. As long as I said a word, he could pretend that everything was normal and make up with me, just like before, covering up all the problems. No matter who was right or wrong, it was always me who gave in first. Every time I put my pride aside to prevent him from losing even a bit of face. But now, how could it be possible that nothing had happened? My parents were dead, and my heart was broken. I looked at him calmly and said lightly, "Okay, let's go back and sign the divorce agreement." Morgan frowned, looking helpless. His voice became gentle. "Wendy, don't be like this. After we finish dealing with our parents' affairs, I'll accompany you on a trip, okay?" In the past, if he had apologized to me, I would have been so excited that I couldn't sleep all night. If there was an additional reward, it would have been the source of my happiness for a month. But now, there was no emotion in my heart. "Morgan, you don't have to be with me out of guilt. It will make you feel tired and make me feel disgusted." The love I once had for him had now become a shackle that bound me. I just wanted to be free in the last moments of my life. "Wendy, I didn't know everything you did for me before. It was my fault. I apologize to you. I ignored you before. Didn't you always want a child? Let's have a child." "No, you can have as many as you want. Our parents always hoped that we would have children. With a child, we can also comfort their spirits in heaven." When I heard him mention the child, I felt even more disgusted. I had personally ended the life of our child. How could I have a child with him again? I didn't want to listen to his self-moving apology. I took out my phone and played that recording with only Morgan's voice. "Master and mistress have been so kind to me. I can never repay their kindness in this lifetime. If it weren't for them, I would have divorced a long time ago. Fortunately, Wendy's first child is gone. Otherwise, I really wouldn't know how to face her child." Morgan was struck as if by lightning. This isn't true. I didn't say that. I didn't mean it like that. "Wendy, this is voice synthesis. I didn't say these words. I can explain it." Looking at his flustered and incoherent appearance, I knew that his mind was in a mess. The sudden death of my parents, his guilt towards my parents, his misunderstanding of me, and the hurt he caused me. These emotions had already broken through his heart. I didn't want to pay attention to him. I didn't have much time left either. I thought I wouldn't have any more emotional fluctuations, until I saw behind Morgan, Hannah walked over holding the dog named Lana. I trembled all over. At the beginning, when I was pregnant with our first child, Morgan drove me to the hospital for a prenatal checkup, and I was very happy. However, on the way, Hannah called and asked him to accompany Lana to the pet hospital. Morgan didn't hesitate to leave me on the side of the road and asked me to take a taxi to the hospital alone. When I was waiting for a taxi on the side of the road with a disturbed mind, I was unfortunately brushed by a passing bicycle and fell to the ground, and I had a miscarriage. In Morgan's heart, perhaps I and the child were more important than Lana, but obviously, we were far less important than Lana's owner. Since that day, I decided that I would no longer love Morgan, but I didn't expect that she would dare to bring this dog to the grave of my parents and openly provoke me. She wanted to make me lose my mind. Indeed, I felt a rush of blood to my head, and anger almost made me lose control. I gritted my teeth and roared, "Morgan, take your mistress and get out of here." However, ignoring my anger, Hannah stepped forward quickly and said in a sorrowful tone, "Sister Wendy, I just heard about Uncle and Auntie's matter. I'm really sorry that this happened. Brother Morgan, I wanted to bring Lana to pay respects to Uncle and Auntie." Hannah pretended to be sad, but the pleasant in the corners of her eyes couldn't be hidden. Without my parents, it seemed that the day when she could take my place was not far away. I glanced at Morgan, who looked embarrassed. If he knew that I had deceived him and hurt him, I think Morgan would definitely slap me without hesitation. Then he would point at my face and scold me for being heartless. But she was Hannah, the white moonlight that Morgan had dreamed of 10 years ago. Even though he frowned and showed his displeasure, he still couldn't say a harsh word to Hannah. He just said to me, Xiaoning didn't mean any harm, just let her pay her respects to master. Did he forget what he said to auntie just now? He knew how much I hated that dog. Forget it, I should have seen this man clearly a long time ago. I walked towards Hannah. She and Morgan looked at me warily, worried that I would go crazy. I just said calmly to Hannah, "You've always wanted to marry Morgan, right? I'll make your wish come true. I've already signed the divorce agreement. Ask Morgan to sign it. You've won." As long as Morgan's wife wasn't me, I didn't care who it was. After saying that, ignoring the joy on Hannah's face, I turned around and left. Morgan grabbed my hand. "Wendy, stop making trouble. I won't get a divorce." "Brother Morgan, I told you earlier that Martin has returned to the country. Is it because of Martin that you're acting like this?" I frowned and looked at them, not understanding why they mentioned Martin. My high school classmate who had already gone abroad. Morgan, I broke free from his hand and wanted to explain, but suddenly I felt a warm liquid flowing out of my nose. The next second, Morgan was completely panicked. "Wendy." My last consciousness stopped at Morgan's panicked cry. When I opened my eyes on the hospital bed, the figure that came into view was Morgan's. He was by my side. When he saw that I had woken up, he asked me with concern how I was feeling. He asked me if I felt uncomfortable, if I wanted to eat something, if I wanted to drink water, or if I was thirsty. All this made me feel as if I was still in a dream. Was it a hallucination when I was seriously ill or a continuation of a nightmare? However, the pain in my body clearly told me that this was reality. Morgan, who had been tired of me after 10 years of acquaintance, could be so gentle. He called the doctor, and I was given a thorough examination. "There's no cure, I'm in the late stage of bone cancer," I said calmly to him. "Your Lana is sick. Go and take care of it. Don't waste your time on me." Morgan shed tears. This big man who was 1.9 meters tall always stood upright with his head held high. Now, he was hunched over and kneeling by my bedside. I felt disgusted and vomited again. "What are you doing?" I snatched the tissue from his hand, wiped it myself, and then threw it away in disgust. What was he pretending for now? "Wendy, we need to talk." His voice was choked with sobs. I thought it was ridiculous. What's there to talk about? My father is dead. Now no one can stop us from getting a divorce. You're free, Morgan. Let's get a divorce. Set you free and set me free too. Morgan was silent for a long time. It seemed that he had 1,000 words to say, but in the end, he just said, "I won't divorce you. You should focus on your treatment now." I felt an inexplicable sense of irritability. But Morgan had already left the ward. While there was no one in the ward, I pulled out the infusion needle and fled the hospital. I didn't have much time left. I went home and packed my luggage simply. I wanted to see the world in the limited time I had, but when I got off the car at the airport, I saw Morgan. He was still wearing the same clothes, his hair was messy, and there were bloodshot eyes in his eyes. When he saw me, he seemed to heave a sigh of relief. "Wife." He walked quickly towards me and gently hugged me in his arms, as if I was a fragile treasure. I pushed him away, filled with disgust in my heart. "Morgan, can't you just leave me alone? You love Hannah, don't bother me anymore." "Okay." I ignored him and turned to leave, but I hadn't walked a few steps when I felt dizzy again and fell down. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself back in that familiar ward. The doctor told me that my condition was already very critical. The blow of my parents' death, coupled with the miscarriage. If I didn't receive treatment immediately, I might not even last a month. Morgan was stunned. In just 2 days, he had lost a lot of weight, as if he had shed dozens of pounds. His eyes were red as he asked, "An abortion?" The doctor was taken aback for a moment and then replied, "Yes, the examination shows that Wendy had an abortion. The embryo was approximately 3 months old." Morgan suddenly turned to me, as if he had remembered something. The appearance of this child was an accident. He hadn't been close to me for a long time. Since his white moonlight had appeared, he had only felt disgust towards me. He especially didn't want me to get pregnant with his child, but that night, he was drunk. It was the tenderness that I hadn't seen for a long time, which made me mistakenly think that he had changed his mind. However, during our intimacy, he held my face in his hands but called out Hannah's name. He had just mistaken me for her. Perhaps he hadn't made a mistake. It was just that the longing in his heart had caused him, who was drunk, to confuse dreams with reality. I still remembered the expression on his face that morning when he realized it was me. Hate wasn't even enough to describe it. It could even be said to be ferocious. Just deal with it yourself. Don't leave a child to disgust me." With these words, he turned and left. That was the beginning of my complete despair towards Morgan. I took birth control pills, but I didn't expect that this child would still tenaciously stay. I ended his life with my own hands. "Did we once have a child?" Morgan asked softly, his lips chapped and his voice hoarse. He looked at me with so much sadness in his eyes that it seemed as if it would overflow at any moment. "Wife, why didn't you tell me about this?" I was at a loss for words and just shook my head in his despair. "We had 2 children. You've forgotten." Yes, he had forgotten all about it. The child we once had. He suddenly woke up with fear in his eyes. He said to me shamefully, "Wife, don't think about it. You just focus on your treatment. We'll have children in the future." I didn't respond to him anymore and turned around to lie down. Late arriving deep affection is cheaper than grass. I didn't need it. The days of chemotherapy were extremely difficult, fortunately. The time I was awake was getting less and less. Morgan had arranged a VIP ward for me. Every day, he personally brought me my favorite red roses. As the president of the company, he stayed by my bedside all day as if nothing else mattered. On the verge of falling asleep, I vaguely heard his subordinate reporting. There was no time for him to have contact with his wife, and there was no opportunity either. Moreover, Mr. Martin has a boyfriend. I endured the pain and turned over. And my consciousness sank into the darkness again. Martin was back. This guy once asked me to pass a love letter to Morgan, and as a result, he was severely beaten up by my sisters. It was quite funny. Time passed in such a chaotic manner, and the time I was awake could be counted in hours. I was getting thinner and thinner, and my hair was falling out in large handfuls. Even the nurse who injected me couldn't help but have red eyes when she saw my appearance. But I didn't care. Soon, I would be able to be reunited with my mom, dad, and baby. I was very happy. However, Hannah didn't seem to be happy at all. Just as I woke up this day and took a small sip of the warm water brought by the nurse, the door of the ward was suddenly pushed open. Hannah, with exquisite makeup, stood in front of my hospital bed and angrily questioned me. "Wendy, what exactly did you say to Morgan?" "Morgan fired me from the company. Is it you who's playing tricks behind my back? You bitch. You can't stand to see me happy even when you're on the verge of death." I looked at her calmly. "Are you done? If you're done, please leave." My indifference made her lose control instantly. "I'm warning you, don't think that your little tricks can change anything. Morgan loves me. He's just taking care of you out of guilt now. As soon as you die, he'll marry me." Hannah rushed towards me excitedly, wanting to attack me, but was stopped in time by the nurse. When Morgan arrived, Hannah had already been firmly controlled by the nurses. She immediately ran towards Morgan and pretended to be pitiful. "Morgan, I just came to visit Wendy. I didn't expect her to treat me like this. I know she doesn't want to lose the title of Mrs. Song, but I'm truly in love with you. I don't care about the title." At this moment, there was an unprecedented look of disgust in Morgan's eyes. Perhaps this was the first time he had looked at Hannah like this. "I planned to use the remaining half year of my life." Hannah was stunned, seemingly unable to understand Morgan's words. "You're divorced. That means you're no longer husband and wife." Morgan nodded. "Yes." Hannah looked at me in confusion, and I faced her calmly. Hannah was filled with shock. She knew very well how deeply I was in love with Morgan, but she had never expected that I would be so resolute in the end. In order to sow discord between me and Morgan, Hannah had gone to great lengths. And she had almost succeeded. However, she had been too hasty. When the truth came to light and the lies were exposed, the hurt was even deeper. "Call someone to send Hannah away." The security guards entered as ordered and were about to take Hannah out. She looked at Morgan with pleading eyes. "Morgan, I had no ill intentions. I'll explain it to you later." But Morgan looked at her with a firm tone. "There's no need, Hannah. From now on, you're not allowed to step into this city, otherwise I'll make your family fall apart. I mean what I say." Hannah was taken away by the security guards amidst her crying and shouting.